Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. And wherever you're joining us from, we're certainly glad to have you here on our webinar today. This will be our first Great Lakes division of the IFC webinar for 2024. We plan on doing them quarterly, and at the end of this webinar, I'll tell you about some of the other things that we have planned. But with no further ado, I'd like to get started. My name is Mike Stanley. I'm the Vice President of the Great Lakes Division, and I'll be the host and moderator through this session. And today I am very excited to have retired Fire Chief Randy Brugman join us. Randy Brugman retired as the Fire Chief for the city of Anaheim, California, and has a career spanning over 4 decades in the fire service. He's a noted author and lecturer on leadership and managing change in the fire service, and he truly wrote the book about fire service administration. He's the past president of the IAFC, past president of the board of directors for the Center for Public Safety Excellence. He has an associate's degree in fire science, a bachelor's degree in business, and a master's degree in management. And he's not very good at staying retired. So he's here today to talk to us about his newest endeavor, the Leadership Crucible. And Randy, if you don't mind, and welcome,
Thank you.
Tell me about the why behind the Leadership Crucible. What did you hope to accomplish with that?
Well, thanks, Chief Stanley, for having me and being our host today. I really appreciate it. And thanks for the work that you're doing each and every day. You know, when I retired in 2018, at the end of 2018 from the city of Anaheim, I took about 6 or 7 months off. And then I was engaged to write a couple of textbooks, which you referenced, for Jones and Bartlett. And we were also just finishing up the 21st Century Fire and Emergency Services report, which the CPSC and the ICMA had asked me to co-chair. And during that time, and then we kind of went into the whole COVID thing. And during that time, sitting back doing research for the 2 textbooks and looking at and observing what was happening in our country and in our world, it just became really frustrating to me that the lack of ethical and leadership and lack of integrity in the leaders that we often see on TV who are called leaders was becoming increasingly problematic for me. And so, you know, in the fire service, we often look at a problem and say, how can I maybe have an impact on that? And that's what kind of was the basis for the Leadership Crucible Foundation and the development thereof. I had a friend, Dave Adams, who many of you may know, who used to own Emergency Reporting. And I was doing some podcasting for Emergency Reporting for a period of time and doing some consulting with them. And they were purchased by ESO. And Dave reached out about 6 or 7 months after that happened and said, would you like to continue podcasting? And I said, you know, I'd really like to, but I said, you know, I've got this other vision. And we started to talk about the lack of leadership that I was seeing, and I think he was seeing as well. And over the course of about a year, 14 months, we developed a concept of the Leadership Crucible Foundation, and that's kind of what the genesis was. And it's kind of led us over the last couple of years into some interesting journey. As I've said, you know, we see people today that are looked upon as leaders, but in fact, I was just watching the news last night, and I saw several of our political leaders get up and just state things that just absolutely weren't true. And, you know, when I look at local government and the responsibilities that our fire and emergency personnel have each and every day, and what our chiefs are put through in the political quagmire that they often work in today, it's just not right. And then if you look at what our next generation of leaders are growing up with, we were fortunate when we were growing up that there was solid leadership that we could look to and say, that's what we should do when we get in those positions. And I wonder what our young generation is looking at today, or most of our young generation, and saying, is that really what we want them to do when they come and become leaders in the next 10 to 15 years? I don't think it is. And so that was the impetus of really what drove the Leadership Crucible. And as we talked through over the course of that 12 to 14 months and started to coalesce around what we wanted to do, There are two things that have always driven me in my career, and this was implanted or instilled in me early on when I first came into the fire service, and it was from, I think, my first officer, one of my first officers, just very bluntly said, if you want to make a difference and leave a legacy in your life, do these two things, and it was to pay it forward and to leave it better than you found it. And if you think about that, in what we do each and every day, if everybody would just do those two things, our organizations would be better, the crews that we lead would be better, our families would be better for it, our cities and counties would be better for it, and our world would be better for it. And so those are kind of the two premise core traits that the Leadership Crucible has been built upon. Another really critical element of this is we know uh, from our own experience, and if you look at the website for the foundation, you can see that we've assembled a pretty diverse board of directors, and also a national advisory council that helps to formulate strategy of where the foundation will go in the future. But one of the premises that I think we all agree on is that experience can be a really good teacher, but it has to be shared with others. And so often we have an experience, but nobody else knows about it. And so that was kind of the premise of how we started to walk down what we were going to build with the foundation. And so we started off with doing podcast and a newsletter every month. And we've been doing that for the past 2 years. In fact, we just finished I think our 44th podcast episode. I think the 21st newsletter is in production right now. So we developed a pretty large breadth of, I think, some really good material. Importantly, and one of the pieces of feedback that I've got from many of the fire and emergency service responders who are listening to our podcast is that they like the variety of people that we have brought on in our podcast. We've interviewed fire chiefs and we'll continue to do fire service personnel. But I've also interviewed people from all walks of life. And I think that's really important that we listen to their perspectives and their experience and learn from them and what they've learned in their own journey. And that's kind of the basis of what we're doing right now. And so in our discussions with the Great Lakes and the Wisconsin fire chiefs over the last several months, we came to a process by which we're taking those podcasts and newsletters and we're co-branding them and we're sending them out to the divisions and to the state associations so that they can take that material and move it to their membership. And we've created co-branded podcasts. We've created a landing page for each association. We've created the ability for or a facilitation guide and a team discussion guide. And our hope is that these materials will be taken by the members of each association and then drive it down into their organization and use that as a training mechanism and have discussions around the coffee table in the firehouse or in the administration building about some of the takeaways that some of these leaders have shared with us. I've already gotten some really good feedback from several chiefs going, we've had these discussions already in our organization. We've sent them out, and the discussions are lasting a lot longer than 1 hour. So I think it's good. It just facilitates, I think, some good dialogue in our organizations, and that's what we need to have. Is just good, effective dialogue and talking about the issues that some of these leaders have faced and then how that relates to us. So that's kind of the basis of the program. One of the things that's nice about, I think, doing it this way is I reached out to ISO and I said, if we did this, would this count as chief officer or officer training in an organization per ISO? And the answer was yes. If it's documented correctly, it can be used as for that 12 hours a year. So that's another benefit.
That's fantastic, Randy. I couldn't agree more that we need to have these discussions around the kitchen table. I think so many of us have the concern about leadership development, personnel development, and tying hand in hand with succession planning in our organizations. And it's very encouraging. I doubt you've had a chance to look at our chat box, but we've got friends on here from Nebraska, Wisconsin, Illinois, all the way to North Carolina. And if you haven't had a chance to drop your name and where you're from in the chat box, that would be great. Additionally, as we go through, you should see a Q&A box over there. If you have questions, we'll be monitoring that, and we'll make sure that Randy gets those, and we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So Randy, you're doing a great job. I love this value add for our members on the Great Lakes Division. I think it's a huge value add for us here locally in Wisconsin for our members as well. So can you tell us some more?
Sure. Yeah. As I discussed, there's a facilitation guide and a team discussion guide. So how this works is we send a link to the association, and the link includes the team discussion guide, the podcast, the opening. There's a message from the president of the association. There's a message from me verbally on the landing page. We also send a facilitation guide, but we send that separately in a PDF file so that the chief of the organization can decide how they want to disseminate that facilitation guide. I've had some focus or some response back from a couple of chiefs saying, yeah, I've sent it out to my battalion chiefs who are using in their battalions. I've sent it out to my captains and had them start to go through that with their crew. Again, a good training mechanism, but it's also, I think, a good learning process for. I actually had an email from one captain that says, yeah, I'm going to rotate this through each one of my personnel on the station and let them take a role or take the lead on facilitating the dialogue over the course of the year. So again, I think it's just a good way to have some good dialogue around the table, but also use it as a team building and a leadership training process as well. Because I think some of the people that we've interviewed just have some really great stories and some perspectives that I think no matter what profession you're in are good lessons to be learned from these folks. So that's kind of how it works. We send out these links once a month at the first week of the month, and we predetermine what's coming, so organizations know what they're going to get. And so if anyone is interested in doing that, just reach out to me, and we can send you what our agreement looks like, and we can start working on getting you on board as well. So some other projects that Chief Stanley I'd like to cover today that we're working on, and I'm really excited about these, because our ultimate objective, the vision that I have, is that the next programs that I'm going to talk a little bit about, that we will offer back to the fire service at a discounted rate. And we have, over the course of the last year, been working on developing curriculum for what we're calling a Pathways program. And as I look back on my career and just having the fortune to having really good mentors and people guide me, it always starts with, you start out you come into the organization as a new recruit, a new firefighter, or whatever your role or responsibility is, and you immediately start to look at, where can I go in the future? And so that was really the concept around the Pathways program. And as we talked through this with our board and our advisory council, it really landed on three areas. One is there's a pathway to your personal success. And that, for us, we identified 10 core character traits that we want to focus on for individuals to begin to develop. And I think this is especially important today, as I have talked with people not only in the fire and emergency services, but other CEOs around the country this past year. One of the common themes that I'm hearing as the new generation has started to enter the workforce is that there's really a need for this type of training to really focus them so that they can be successful in the future. In those 10 areas, and I'm just going to go through these real quick, are courage, respect, ethics, and integrity, commitment, accountability, and reliability, work ethic, humility, leading yourself, developing a growth mindset, and following your passion. We landed on those 10 issues after much discussion within our own organization, but also outreach to leaders across the strata of different professions, just getting their feedback about what they were seeing and what their needs were to help their employees focus to be a success in the future. And so the pathways to personal success is that foundational element. It lays the foundation for an individual to really prepare themselves to take that next step. And the next step is leadership. When they move up in the organization, their pathway to leadership success is number one, built upon their pathway to their personal success. They've done the right things to lay that their own foundation to be successful. But it's also about then as they take the lead, whether it's a team, a station, whatever their role and responsibility is, it's about, we know, because we've all done it, or most of us probably listening to this call, we've taken that step. And you often find when you put the captain's badge on or you put a chief officer badge on, you never really know until you're sitting in the seat what that's like, right? And there's a whole plethora of things that you thought you knew, but you don't. And so we've identified about, I'm not going to go through all of them, but we've identified about 45 things today that leaders really need to be adept at. And it's much more complex than when I started as a fire chief, 30 years ago. I mean, the world today is pretty complex. And just one of the things is just leading a multi-generational workforce today. Much different than it was in the past. But it's also about strategic marketing and being a brand ambassador and things like that, where we need to really focus on our leadership skill set so that we can address all of the new dynamic that's in our organizations. And we think that's really, really important. Chief?
Yeah. So I want to dive a little deeper here, Randy, and challenge you a little bit. We started with, you talked about the why of the leadership crucible, and what caused you to transition to forming this foundation. But let me challenge you with the so what. You say we need these 10 things, and that they're crucial for promotion. But the fire service, we've never had a trouble with getting people to take promotional exams. Somebody will always want to be the boss, and we've always been able to attract employees. People want to work for the fire department, and somebody eventually wants to have those 5 gold bugles. So, so what? Why do we need this? Why do I need this in my organization? And what happens if we don't do it? What's the drawback to our own departments and to the fire service if we don't take some of these steps?
That's an excellent question. And I think the why is that I think we're seeing a generational shift of perspective of people that are entering the workforce. And I'm hearing that from not only within our own ranks, but I'm hearing that from many other leaders in other professions. And so I think the why is that we need to build the future workforce around some core tenets. But you brought up another really, really interesting point is we have no problem getting people to promote, and we have no problem people applying to be in the fire and emergency services. That's changing. In fact, it's becoming a pretty significant issue in a lot of parts of the country where people don't want to enter the fire and emergency services. And if they do, they're only staying, 3 to 4 to 5 years, and then they're rotating out to do something else. That's probably a generational issue. But we're also seeing it, and I was seeing this in California even before I retired, is people stepping up. They'll step up to a certain level, but they don't want to take a chief's role, or they don't want to sometimes they don't even want to take a captain's role. And so I think it is an issue, but why would organizations want to do this? I think if you're going to build your culture for the future, you need to build it on a foundational element of training your employees or helping your employees to build that foundation so that they're successful individually, but also then rolling that into the culture of your organization. Because as we look to what will happen in the 21st century fire and emergency services, and this goes back to the report that I co-chaired, I think we're going to see significant changes in how we deliver service, and the demands for our service are going to change. They already are changing dramatically. And it's going to take people that have a good sense of who they are, and I think a good foundational piece to be able to handle the stresses and strains that they're going to face as they go through their career, and become leaders in the future of what the fire service is going to be. And so I think that's the why. And for any organization, just not us, not the fire and emergency services, but for any organization, I think you need to invest in your people coming in to build those skill sets that you want them to have to become future leaders in the future. And so often we don't do that. We're really good at focusing on training them to be firefighters and medics and things like that. We don't do a really good job sometimes of focusing on, developing their skill set to become really fine leaders in the future. And that's the why. And I think we need to make an investment there.
Yeah, I loved your response, Randy, and thank you. And what you just said, it seems like, in my experience, and in public safety and uh, many others, we've held on to the adage that if you're a good technician, you'll be a good supervisor.
Yeah.
That if you're good at cutting a hole in the roof, you'll be a good lieutenant or a captain. So maybe you can dive a little deeper on, what does that future leader look like? If many of us on the call still have long career runways, and what are the skill sets that not only I may need to develop in my people for succession planning, but what about for me? And how could some of these pathways and those 10 core principles apply to the current fire chief?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think they do. And I think that from the leadership skill set, I think you're right. We've had many good technicians that have moved up and have not been the greatest of leaders. And part of that is, I think, an organizational issue, because we really haven't trained them to do so. And we've trained them to be good technicians. We have not trained them to be good leaders. And so I think, as I've stepped up through the organizations that I've worked for and have led organizations, I think it takes, there's just a different skill set that is needed today than there may have been 20 years ago. But there's a different skill set when you sit in a chief officer role versus a captain's role versus an engineer or a paramedic role. It just changes. The dynamic changes, and your views got to change. You've got to be a visionary, a strategic thinker as you move up. I think you also have to develop your soft skill sets, which are really, really important to be able to migrate through and have those difficult conversations with people, and do the right thing for the organization, but also keep everybody on the boat, so to speak. And it's difficult to do. And so some of that is on the job learning, but some of that you can develop skill sets prior to being thrown in those positions. And I think that's the purpose of what we're trying to do, is to try and build leadership success in individuals based upon those topics that we have identified that most leaders will struggle with, the power of having vision, the power of being able to be be empathetic and empower others, but also make them toe the line, if you will, make them accountable. And that's really always a balancing act. It's really difficult for some chief officers and captains to do that. And so I think it's about honing your skill set not only from a personal standpoint, but from a leadership standpoint that will make our organizations in the future be much more productive, be better, have a culture that is more adept and adaptable, but also be a culture where people want to work. And I think as we move into this 21st century, I think it's recruitment is still going to be an issue for many organizations, and I think people will look to work for people or organizations that align with their value set. So if I'm looking at your organization and I know that you're going to invest in me as an individual to help me be successful, I'll probably come work for you versus another department that does not do that.
Yes, so true, Randy. I think many of us on the call are experiencing that. It is such a uber competitive market. If you're not going to add value to me, if you're not going to help me grow and develop, then I'm going to go somewhere else. And you talked about the need. And I think we're all convinced on the call. At least I'm convinced. You're right. This is something I need to do, but there's a lot of things I need to do. And really, what it always is, you well know, and you and I've talked about, always comes down to my two limiting factors as a fire chief. I don't have much time, and I don't have much money.
Yeah.
So tell me more about how this is not only a solution that I should use, but how it can address those couple of concerns.
Well, I think what we're already doing with Wisconsin and Great Lakes is we're providing you with basically 12 hours of training a year for, I think the cost for an association is $2,500 a year, and it's $3,500 a year for a division. And if you pencil that out, sending that out to every organization, if they used it, it would be pennies per head, maybe $1 per head of everybody in that state or in that division. So that's pretty cost effective. And it's pretty user friendly. You don't have to do a lot of work. You just have to repost it or send it out through your LMS or training system. And we're building this Pathways program to do exactly the same thing. It will be cost effective. We don't know what the cost is because we're just getting into the build right now, but it's going to be cost effective and it's going to be user friendly. And so we think those are really two critical things for organizations today, because you're right, Chief, it's money's an issue for most local government agencies today, and also just time. So you don't want to have to take a program and redesign it. You may not have the staff to do that. And so that's what our objective is, to make it as easy as possible for you to use in your organization, but give you the flexibility to actually use it how you want to use it. So it's I've been through a lot of these type of courses in my career that are pretty scripted. So you just have to do it this way. And I think organizations need to have some flexibility in how they use it and how they repurpose it in their own organization so it has the best benefit for them.
Randy, on behalf of the Great Lakes Division, I for one certainly appreciate the fact that you have taken those things into consideration. That you've tried to make it, road ready, but still allow us some flexibility, but realize that we have limitations around time and staff. And I really view this as a give back from you to the American Fire Service, because it is so economical. Like you said, it's really pennies on the dollar, especially comparative to some of the other educational offerings that we either have to use or choose to use. So very grateful that you're still in love with the fire service and willing to do that.
No,
go
ahead.
A couple logistical questions for you, and I know we'll cover it later in the slides, but we've probably perked people's interest a little bit. You said that I can can find all these, 40 some podcasts you've done and, some of these resources, where do I go to find that?
You can go to the leadershipcruciblefoundation.org, and you can get it on the website. It's got a resource page, but you can. I would encourage you to explore what we're doing, and look at who's on our board, look at who's on our advisory council, look at our material, and see if it's worthwhile. The benefit, of course, of doing it this way is it's kind of a mutual benefit. Number one, you're getting it co-branded for your organization, so you're getting a return on your investment. And then you're helping the foundation, because we're a small foundation, even though we have some bigger hitters on our board. We're a relatively small, underfunded foundation, and so any money that we get, we just put right back into building more product. And so that's kind of the mission.
Awesome. Then another question for you is, you talked about, you're still in the developmental stages on the pathways, and always in the developmental stages of other projects. Are you still looking for feedback? And the folks that are on this call or watch the recording later, are you interested in hearing from them about the issues that they're struggling with, or the solutions that they need for their departments?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, yeah. If there's some issues that they think need to be addressed, shoot them to me. Yeah, we're still in the process. I've got the curriculum designed, but we're probably about 2 to 3 months out from actually starting to build it. So now's a great time to just plug in and say, hey, this is what we're seeing. You might want to address these 10 issues. That'd be great.
Fantastic.
I really appreciate that.
All right, I'll quit pestering you for a bit and let you get back to.
So the last thing on this pathway. Okay, no, that's good. And I just want to cover the last piece on this, and that's the pathways to organizational success. And we've identified 7 areas that we're going to build training modules around. And one is positioning your organization to succeed in the future. Because the fact of the matter is, and I've talked a lot about this and have given a lot of presentations on the 21st Century Report, and the fact of the matter is the speed at which our organizations are going to be impacted in the future will be nothing compared, as compared to the past, it's going to be light speed. We're going to see impacts of our organization, technology, data change the very way we do business in the future. So you need to start to position your organization today to be successful and sustainable in the future today. Building a culture of excellence. One of the things that I found as a fire chief, and I wish I would have spent more time, talent, and treasure on, was building the culture of the organizations that I led. We talked a lot about it. We did the mission, vision, values thing and all of that, but you really have to invest in building that culture. And so we're going to spend a series on that. Program 3 is developing the strategies for organizational success. And that looks at all of the things that roll up into an organization that makes it successful today, tomorrow, and well into the future. Continuous self-improvement is Program 4. And that looks at, the development of opportunities within your own organization to continuously evaluate how you're assessing and progressing your organization so that it is successful in the future. Program 5 is being an effective individual and organizational communicator. That's a failing that so many of us make, is that we think that we've done a good job, but we haven't. And so we're going to focus a whole series on just being able to build that strategy in yourself and in your organization so that communication is transparent and in real time. And then Program 6, leading and managing in a rapidly changing environment. I think that's one of the things that I think leaders, not only in our profession, but many professions today, are really struggling with, because the change and the rapidness of what's occurring in many organizations today is tough to react to. And so that takes a little bit different perspective than many of us in the fire services have been trained on. We're really good at reacting outside of the firehouse when the tone goes off. But we don't like, our stuff moved around once we come back home. And so, and we're in the firehouse. But the fact of the matter is, world's changing quite rapidly, and we have to be able to lead and manage through that. And then Program 7 is really about developing a relevant organization for the 21st century and what that looks like, and reimagining what our organization may look like 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. And that takes us from our perspective often. So often we have a 1-year budget perspective or a 5-year strategic planning perspective. But I think as leaders today, we need to be looking down the road and say, what's going to be relevant in the future, and how do we begin to position and develop our organizations to be able to do that.
So, Randy, I'm keeping an eye on the chat over here, and it truly is the International Association of Fire Chiefs. And like to welcome our colleagues from abroad. That we've got a couple folks I see on here from Portugal and also from Germany. So thank you for taking the time.
Absolutely.
And working through the time differences to be here with us. Randy, you dropped the buzzword. You said the C word, and that's all we hear about anymore. Every conference you go to, every article you read, culture, 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 culture. You and I have had some great conversations about what that means. What is the definition of culture in, the significance it plays in our department. I think it'd be great to have you share some of your thoughts around that and that definition of culture, because we hear it's important. We hear we need it. We hear we need to build it and fix it, but I don't even know what it is. How can I make that more tangible and get my hands around that?
Well, I think the academic definition of culture is how one or a group of individuals react to what's going on around them, and what the expectation is of that culture. And so, if you look at the Fire and Emergency Services, we are a fairly tradition-based organization. We are reticent to change in many arenas. And I have a philosophy about this. I think that firefighters and paramedics are called each and every day to events that they just absolutely don't know when they walk through the door in the morning what they're going to go to. And the last thing they want is to come back into the firehouse and have to deal with a lot of change. But the fact of the matter is, that's the world that we live in today. So I think when we talk about building a culture, I think we talk about building a culture that's built on some of the tenets that we've talked about with the Pathways program. But I think it's also about building a culture that can embrace being adept at being adaptable, because we're going to have to be able to change quickly. We can't wait 4 to 5 years and say we want to do things very slowly. We want to step into something and it's going to be 3 to 4 years out. It's just not going to work that way anymore. And so I think we have to build that culture that can do that. And I think we have to build a culture that is very based on some of these core tenets that we've talked about. Ethics is a big issue. Integrity for us. Our brand is everything, and we need to make sure that we focus on maintaining that brand. But we have to build a culture in each one of our organizations that can be adept and adaptable in a much quicker fashion than we have in the past.
Fantastic answer. I know that I've benefited greatly from some of those conversations with you around culture, and I would wager that everybody else on the call is benefiting from that discussion as well. We've flirted a little bit about succession planning in our discussions, and talking about building for the future, and those type of things, and creating a culture that attracts people. But I see your next slide says leaders of tomorrow.
Yeah.
What can you tell me about that?
Well, one of the things that has been a focus of the foundation is not only training and helping to facilitate good leadership in today's leaders, but also looking at the next generation that's going to take our place. And so we're just launching. In fact, it'll probably start next month. The Leaders of Tomorrow a format. It's going to have be doing podcasting and some leadership forums with leaders of tomorrow that fall into the 18 to 35-year-old category. And we just want to have dialogue with them and get them to thinking about, number one, the pathways issues, but also, what does leadership look like for them? And just start to have some dialogue about, what good leadership looks like. And because I think if we don't invest our time into helping create good leaders for tomorrow, I think our country and many of our cities and counties are in trouble. And so I was just fortunate to be at the Bush School of Business at Texas A&M over this past week, and meeting with young professionals that are going through the Bush School Master's Program. Their focus is they're going into local government, and I was really encouraged by what I saw, and the young people that I met that have a servant's heart for public service, but they want to do it the right way. They want to lead the right way. And so the Leaders of Tomorrow is simply about that. We're going to create a forum and a dialogue that we can help young people who want to aspire to be leaders in the future do it the right way.
Fantastic. Keep rolling, my brother. You're doing great.
Well, so how can you engage with us? We've got a couple of minutes left, but I think how you can engage with us is number one. We would hope that if there are chiefs listening, that we can get your associations and your divisions to sign up with us. Sign up and subscribe on our website so that you're getting our information, and just stay tuned for our Pathways program to come out, and hopefully your departments will want to engage in that as well. And so I think that's how the engagement that we need right now. If you want to send us a couple of dollars, we always like that. It all goes back into the production of our product. And but other than that, I think it's just providing us feedback too. I just love. I get probably 10 or 15 comments a week that I try and respond to each one of them. But some really good insights from people, all over the country about, have you thought about this, or I really like this, or so. I think that's important. The last thing is this: if you know somebody that is really making an impact in your city, your county, at the state level, that's really made a difference in the lives of other people, send me, put us together, because those are the people that I want to talk to, the people that are really impacting other people's lives in a positive way.
So, as we're coming to an end here, Randy, that and those of you in the listening audience, if you have questions, please throw them up there in the Q&A section of the chat board. I said we've got our eye on that, and I'll read those off to Randy, and he can answer your questions here live. That and I really would encourage you, in our listening audience, that when you get an opportunity, as soon as this call is done, take a peek at the podcasts that are on the website. That it really is an amazing depth and breadth of the variety of leaders that are on there. And hearing their leadership journey, the experiences they've been through, what made them the leaders that they became, just fantastic listening. So you're generally, as Randy, I think you said earlier, you're about an hour for the most part, but invest in yourself. That I'm always been a fan of the automobile university of, when you're driving, that's when you get your education. Take that time to listen to these podcasts when you're working out or driving, or, need to mentally decompress a little bit. That they're outstanding. And, I will out Randy, as saying that, what a great resource. He is an excellent, trusted advisor and resource, And my experience has been, he'll help you however he can. That when we were just getting ready for the call, you talked about that you hope to attend the FRI in Dallas this year.
Yep.
So his name now. You've seen a picture of him. That I'll try to do you a solid here, Randy, and at least buy him a cocktail or a soda pop. But come up, talk to him, pick his brain a little bit. That we said wealth of information and resources. So don't be afraid to take advantage of that if you're not asking questions now. That any other conferences or travels we may see at in the future, immediate future here, Randy?
Well, I'm going to go up to Canada next week to speak at a conference, but nothing else right now.
Yeah. And if you're looking for speakers for your conference, people to come in and help you solve problems in your department, reach out to Randy, because if he's not available, my bet is he can connect you with somebody that can help you find that solution. I know we're always all looking for dynamic speakers and for people to present at our state conferences and things of that nature. That I know he's still, even though he's supposed to be retired, he's a pretty busy fella, but he also knows people. So utilize him as a resource. And I'm not seeing a ton of questions or any so far in the chat, Randy. So I think we covered things pretty comprehensively. And before we wrap up, just a couple of things. One, certainly I'd like to thank the person behind the scenes that makes all this magic happen. That we couldn't do it without Nam from the IAFC. She's the one that gets this all set up, does the webinar, and is the person behind the curtain, as she puts it, that makes the magic happen. So really super appreciate her and the IFC for giving us this platform. That's things for you to look forward to. That June 11th will be our next Great Lakes Division webinar. We're going to talk about the modern day recruiter. We talked a lot today about some of those challenges around recruitment and retention, and we'll have retired Fire Chief Jerry Strike, who's going around the country and doing a lot of these workshops and has really a great message. That he's from our own backyard here in the Great Lakes Division from the great state of Minnesota. So we'll look forward to having him the 11th. Same time of day. You'll be able to find the information on the website, and we'll message that out through the Great Lakes Division as well. That Randy, as we come to a conclusion here, anything else you'd like to share?
No, Chief Stanley, I just appreciate the opportunity to be here and to engage with your group, and appreciate all the support that you've provided to the foundation over the past year, and just looking forward to continuing to expand out in the future.
Outstanding. And for all of our Great Lakes Division members, we hope to see you at the FRI conference. That will be hosting a social event, as we do every year, in addition to the lunch business meeting. So we hope you can all join us not only at the conference in Dallas, but also at some of our hosted events. That we also will be representing you at the Congressional Fire Service Institute coming up next month in Washington, D.C., where we'll go and meet with the different elected officials, the senators and Congress people from all of the Great Lakes Division states, so that we can continue to advocate for national and federal support for what we do, for our people and our communities. So we'll continue to work that way. And absolutely, if you have ideas, please reach out to us and let us know for other webinar topics. That we really want this to be about you and meeting your needs, and how we can provide good quality use of your time with these different webinar topics. So if you have somebody that that has a great topic, or you do, that by all means let us know and we'll get them booked. So with that being said, I think we'll give you a few minutes of your day back. Appreciate everybody's time and their participation, and most importantly, keep your people safe out there. So be well, and we'll talk to you in a couple months.